mindset sort of believes that on the part of a lot of those young people that they don't belong in that space, that they're essentially imposters in that space, that it's a space that's not for them. What kinds of instruments, what kinds of motivation can we create that will encourage people to feel that they absolutely own that space? I mean, have you, anybody here, had any particular or specific experience with that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. One of the things that we do, in Girl Scouts, we really strongly believe that Girl Scouts is for every girl everywhere. And we actually in this council do a leadership conference for Latina girls. And this past year, because we saw the pressing need for it, we built it around a STEM theme. So girls did coding workshops, girls did making workshops, girls learned from women in positions of power in the STEM community and from women who are going to eventually be in positions of power in the STEM community. Where we see the success in that is having the mentorship and the role models. When we can provide girls and girls of color, girls of any girl, with the ability to see somebody who looks like her doing something cool, doing something unique, doing something different, she begins to see that it's possible. So having those role models to look up to is the direction that we try to move in.
I think that's very, very powerful. I would like to add one thing to that. One of the methodologies that we have experimented with over the years in Boston is something called Learn to Teach, Teach to Learn. I mentioned it just a little bit earlier, but it's fascinating to see what happens when you take a person who doesn't feel like they belong in the space. We bring them to MIT for 8 weeks, and then we acclimate them and introduce them to the rudiments of technology, but we then teach them to teach. Well, we then send them back to the community to teach their peers, and it goes to your role modeling idea. And there's something very powerful about a 16-year-old, who is supervised by a 19-year-old, who is teaching other 13, 14, and 15-year-olds, and then teaching younger kids. When they see somebody who's out front of them, that looks a little like themselves, that talks a little like them, and then when this young person, who is now this youth teacher, has a responsibility to try to teach something that they didn't know a whole lot about 3 months ago, I mean, you really got to do your homework. And then in the summer, they get paid. So now they got a job, teaching. And so one of the most interesting reactions to that experience was when I saw a young man who had been interviewed, and he said, I never knew what teaching was like, what it was all about. These kids are really a pain in the butt, but I like it, and I've seen some of those people actually go on to become teachers. So I do think that the role modeling that you describe is very important, and there isn't enough of that out there, but also when peers can teach peers, there's a level of exchange and trust that occurs. If I'm standing there trying to teach a young person Scratch, it's very different than a 14, 15, 16-year-old trying to teach them Scratch. So I would also encourage, as we think about the adults doing their thing, that we also have young people become teachers and convey that knowledge to other young people.
And Tucker, I'm going to just jump in and say that is so core to Girl Scouts. We have, Girl Scouts serves girls from kindergarten through 12th grade, and part of our program model is that as girls age up in the program, that they turn around and they mentor and coach younger girls. So there is, we call it progression, but it's built into our program, and there are actually awards that girls earn in order to teach and mentor younger girls, and it's core.
See, I think spreading that and making more people aware of that, because I never would have guessed that that's one of the things that the Girl Scouts do. It's a very powerful model.
Thank you.
It's a very powerful. It's like, it's in a way, it's like, and you would get this. It's like the old Michelangelo model. He didn't do all the David. He had the idea, then he had the master apprentices, then he had the lower apprentices, then he had the junior apprentices, and that approach it could be very powerful if applied to the idea of bringing young people into the technology space.
And I want to touch on that, saying that's what could happen in a maker space.
Yes.
I do not need credentialed educators to teach. I need you. Do you have a skill? Do you have a hands-on skill? I don't care if you're 14 or 94. My woodshop teacher is a retired insurance broker. My electronics teacher, a young lady who just graduated with her EE degree, teaches kids how to solder. We are makers. That's the way we've done education for thousands of years. A master, you supply apprentices. And to go back to your earlier point about how do we get people involved in making, my place looks like the UN. We are 40% female by membership. I'll give you our secret. It's called cosplay. Costume and prop making brings everyone in. And let me tell you, if you think it's easy to make an Iron Man suit or a warrior princess, you are learning plastics and composites. You're learning electronics, 3D printing, laser cutting, sewing, textiles, welding, fab. You can't imagine it. And along the process, you tell this child, I mean, we have cosplayers in their 40s, that these are marketable skills you can put on your resume. And that is amazing to us. And you get to have a lot of fun playing dress up.
Go, please.
But another aspect of that is reaching out. We talk about reaching out to various groups and making sure we have diverse populations, which is certainly a goal of all of us. There's also a whole other set of kids who are already lost. Right? Society looks at them as well. They're already involved in the system. One of our most exciting programs right now, we've paired with our local police chief and a couple of youth programs that are already intervening with some of these at-risk youth, and we're saying, bring them in. We'll do 4 or 5 classes and just put them in front of a mill and a CNC and let them make something out of plastic. Maybe we get them, maybe we don't, but we just did our first class of 6 kids, and I think 2 of them are going to come back to teach. So
that's
give them purpose.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's
right.
We give them purpose to the world.
That's right.
So can I have 2 points. One to the role model. As a middle-aged white guy, I'm not the best role model but it is shown that when you have a role model that looks, talks, comes from the same culture, then you see yourself being able to do that. The other point, and that's just, we know that and we need to be intentional about it. The other thing that we also know is, humans are makers. We have been since the very beginning of humanity. And the other way to get kids, specifically, to understand that they're makers, whether that is coding or whether that is textiles or whatever, is give them the opportunity to do so. Because once they have, there are organizations like Black Girls Code and Girl Scouts, etc., that give those opportunities. If schools gave those opportunities, then those kids will see themselves that way because they will know, wait, I am this too. It's not a purview of just that group, it's a me too.
And I want to just give a shout out to Maker Ed for the collaboration that they did with Girl Scouts nationally to supplement some Girl Scout program resources with a Maker supplement that shows our troop leaders exactly how they can layer in these skills and these ideas and concepts. And we use that all the time in our Maker activities. So that's a great example of how you can partner to make that happen.
I really want to emphasize that we're talking about communities and makers, and so often if you'll get I've seen you get a makerspace that pops up, and we're makers, right? We know that we can do it, but there's also a lot of people in the community that have already done a lot of these things, right? There's there's organizations that have done outreach, there's organizations that provide certificates, there's all of these, and I think it's so critical for us not to silo ourselves, but to think of ourselves as part of a larger organization. We're the makers, but there's also educators. There's also people working with at-risk youth. We tapped into our network of on the lower economic side of town. We tapped into the preachers. Right? The preachers it's what a great resource.
The first great tinkerer I ever met was my grandmother. She could tinker with a chicken like you wouldn't believe. She could barbecue it, bake it, fricassee it, stew it, make chicken salad. And so I think, and if you think about, our time as kids, you remember how a stick was everything? It was a horse, it was a gun, it was a spear, it was a baseball bat. So I think that the idea of making and tinkering is really in the spirit of everybody. And so, I mean, the entire MIT pedagogy is based on making and doing, and prototyping, and so I just think it's in the DNA of just about everybody. But there's this whole funny, crazy thing that happened in the public educational system where they took away making music, they took away making art, they took away making things in the shop, and the reason the maker economy is, and the maker idea is so important is because it will be ultimately a great contributor to American productivity and American competitiveness and to American workforce development. Now that's very, very important because if you look at what's going on in terms of world economies and you realize that at a point in time, India and China are going to become very, very much more powerful and much more important as they turn out fabricators, and inventors, and innovators, and computer scientists. We have to plant those seeds in our young people so we can be enormously competitive and enormously forward-thinking, as we go into the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Now, I have an example. And this is the one when I go to the historically black colleges and universities where we're now in collaboration with a number of them to build spaces that will help to create the next generation of computer scientists, innovators, and inventors that come from that experience. I use a tool, and that tool was the miniaturized recorder. There was a time when you'd have to pay $350 or $400 an hour, and then one day, some young people in urban areas got hold of those miniaturized recorders, same 12 notes as Stravinsky. Stravinsky went out one door with his 12 notes, and Jay-Z went out the other door with his 12 notes, and more people buy Jay-Z records. And Dr. Dre ultimately sold the company to Apple for $3 billion based on a music career that was born with access to tools. And so as we talk about fabrication, as we talk about incentives, we're talking about access to tools, access to another way of thinking, access to enchantment, to creativity, to critical thinking. And yesterday I was watching, the NBA Finals, and this ad came on. It was extraordinary. I don't know if anybody saw it, but it was for the new iTunes music service. Has anybody seen that ad? It's off the hook. But that whole new iTunes music service is based on the system that they bought from Dr. Dre. So the opportunity in terms of us educating, propagating, advancing productivity is extraordinary. Beyond the idea of just having play, fun, creativity, critical thinking. So anyway,
I'll take it one step further. Our survival as a nation depends on it. We are a nation of makers. The reason the United States, America, became the powerhouse of the world is we made the things the world wanted and needed. If we stop making the things the world wants and needs, if we stop innovating, guess what? The world no longer needs us.
that's right.
So it's much more important than just our entertainment or some skills. It's our future.
That's exactly
And
right.
just to jump on top of that too, it's also about making the world a better place, which to bring the Girl Scout mission into play. And I want to just tell a story about a Girl Scout troop from Iowa. They're called the Flying Monkeys, or they formed a first Lego robotics team called the Flying Monkeys. And their project was to create a prosthetic robotic hand because the younger sister of a girl in their troop had lost her hand or didn't have a hand at birth. It was a situation like that. And these girls at the time were maybe in 6th, 7th grade. They ended up winning the competition. Their invention has now been patented. But where they got the drive and the instinct to do this is because they wanted to help somebody. They wanted to improve lives. And we see for young women, especially for girls, that's the entree into making. That's the entree into STEM, is how can you improve the world? How can you make the world a better place? And then then that leads to that innovation, and that leads to that economic drive.
Right.
But I think it's important to keep in mind that we're about more than economics. We're also about improving the world that we live in.
That's exactly right.
And I would distill that down and say it's really our responsibility as makers, as sort of the leaders in this forefront. It's our responsibility to see that no idea goes undone for lack of a tool.
That's right. That's right. Now, this is an interesting